Doctor, another interesting forum that is on right now is the Permanent People's Tribunal in Germany. It's a Rome-based tribunal. I don't think many people are aware of what's going on in this tribunal. Care to explain a little bit to our viewers, Doctor, on what the dynamics in this tribunal is all about? And they're currently moving a hearing on Sri Lanka and its war crimes and human rights allegations.
Alleged war crimes.
Alleged war crimes.
Yeah. Mahina, this is, I take this very seriously, because when you are criticized or targeted by both the right and the left, then you're doing something very wrong. We were talking about Mandela. We said he was being praised by the right and the left. We said the global north and the south are applauding him. That means he did something right. But if you're being attacked by David Cameron and Stephen Harper, who belong to the conservative movement, and if you're also being attacked by the Permanent People's Tribunal, then that's the left. And you're losing left-wing governments in Latin America, which used to vote for you, are now voting against you. And that's not because they have these great relations with the United States. Then there's something seriously wrong with what the country is doing in the realm of external relations. Now, the Permanent People's Tribunal has a brilliant history. It's not so brilliant now, but it was founded in the late 60s by the two most legendary philosophers of that time, perhaps of the second half of the 20th century, Bertrand Russell and Jean-Paul Sartre. And this was instituted to go into the evidence of the war crimes being committed by the United States of America against Vietnam. These were the days of the Vietnam War. And the Americans were using napalm firebombs, white phosphorus, cluster bombs, children were dying, defoliants were being dumped, Agent Orange, children were being born deformed. So the intellectuals of the world decided that it is their duty to come out against this, and they instituted a tribunal. That was how it started. Now, after the death of those two philosophers and the end of the Vietnam War with the victory for Vietnam, the tribunal found a home in Rome, in Italy. There was a foundation called the Lelio Basso Foundation, named after Lelio Basso, who was a very well-known Italian socialist leader who was murdered by the fascists. The foundation was instituted in his name, and they said, look, we will provide the institutional backup for this tribunal, and it can investigate what's going on in all parts of the world. So you had the Permanent People's Tribunal, and you don't have that quality of intellectuals and philosophers on it anymore, but it is not to be written off, because these are well-known civil society figures of the left, of the radical movement, of a progressive persuasion. That doesn't mean that what they say is correct, but it does mean that we are being threatened on our left flank as well as on our right flank.
And Doctor, these allegations or these charges that are going to be made at the tribunal against Sri Lanka are going to be made by the International Human Rights Association and the Forum for Peace in Sri Lanka. Yeah, the Irish Forum for Peace in Sri Lanka, these two international bodies. Is there anyone from Sri Lanka's side who's there to represent and counter these allegations or charges?
I don't think so. I'm not even sure that those who are responsible for foreign policy formulation in Sri Lanka, which the minister is only one and the ministry is only one, I don't think they know about this. I don't think they care, but they should, because there's a misplaced notion on the part of the government of Sri Lanka, and I know this because I was serving the state at one time. They think that, look, we are a government, we don't have to respond to these guys, these are civil society people, we don't do that kind of thing. Now, this was the same thinking, believe it or not, that made the same government of Sri Lanka not respond to the so-called Darusman Commission. Now, the Darusman Commission was not a civil society commission. It was a panel of experts appointed by Ban Ki-moon. But we said, we, the government of Sri Lanka, we don't have to respond to this. So basically, we are not responding to anything. The problem in not being represented at the People's Tribunal is this. Today, foreign policy is increasingly impacted upon, maybe even made, by international public opinion, and certainly the public opinion in key states which are democracies. International opinion is influenced by multiple sources, and those multiple sources have been campaigning and canvassing against Sri Lanka for a period of years. So when the People's Tribunal, which in and of itself may be no big deal, adds its voice and its weight and its evidence, because this is a tribunal, they are going to have hearings.
And the hearings are going to be attended by victims or people who have been directly affected by the conflict in Sri Lanka.
Correct. They're going to come before the tribunal and testify. Now, this is a miniature court. It's a model court, if you want to put it that way.
Doctor, the Permanent People's Tribunal, can Sri Lanka take this lightly? And there are reports that have come out where the hearings of this tribunal will be sent to the UNHRC.
No, Sri Lanka cannot take this lightly. The Permanent People's Tribunal has a very dramatic history. It was started by Bertrand Russell and Jean-Paul Sartre. It no longer has luminaries of that sort on it. But it is a not insignificant forum of fairly well-known global civil society intellectuals. And the process of hearings is significant. They are going to be calling for witnesses from among alleged victims of violence in Sri Lanka. The report is going to be sent to the Human Rights Council. It will have an impact in certain legislatures in the world. Certainly it might have an impact in the cabinets of left-of-center governments in Latin America, because those Latin American governments have had close relations with the left-wing intellectuals who are members of the Permanent People's Tribunal. These are old relationships. Now, Sri Lanka has a serious problem. We are being attacked from the right of the spectrum, that is David Cameron, Stephen Harper, and now the Permanent People's Tribunal indicates that there's a strong critique from the left as well. We were talking about Nelson Mandela and how he has been applauded from right to left, which indicated that he had done something correct. Now, if conversely you are being criticized, if your country is being criticized from both right and left, then that means there's a serious problem with your image, your external image, that there's no constituency you can really count on out there. Now, foreign policy is formulated in the 21st century also by international opinion, by public opinion, opinion in global civil society. The proceedings of the Permanent People's Tribunal and the report will have some contributory effect on global opinion, which is already quite adverse concerning Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, however, I don't believe is represented either officially or unofficially by intellectuals who would be sympathetic to the position of the Sri Lankan state, or at least who are opposed to the kind of unfair criticisms that might be made. And that's because the Sri Lankan system thinks that we don't have to bother with global civil society, which is completely myopic, since civil society is also a player in the formulation of foreign policy and in the dynamics of global politics today. But unfortunately, the Sri Lankan state doesn't seem to know much about the dynamics of contemporary global politics.
Doctor, the Permanent People's Tribunal is also going to touch on the role of three important countries that have been very vocal on the situation in Sri Lanka and about alleged human rights. The three countries mainly being the US, Britain and India's role during the conflict in Sri Lanka, during the peace talks, and also during post-war. Is this going to be taken out? Because these are reports that are coming out about this tribunal.
Well, I think so, and I think what will happen is that the governments of India, United States and the UK will be put under pressure by left-wing or independent radical members of parliament in their legislatures, and also very importantly in the European Parliament, where the Green parties are powerful. In the EU Parliament, also in Australia, we saw the importance of the Greens. Now, they will use the Permanent People's Tribunal documents and say, look, you have been responsible for supporting Sri Lanka, which committed these crimes against humanity. And therefore, the governments, in order to cover up that criticism, cover their flank, are more likely to take a harder line against Sri Lanka. Now, look what happened with Australia. They supported us during the Commonwealth. But now, Major General Jagat Das has been denied a visa to attend an ICRC conference in Australia. Why? I mean, this is by the Australians. The reason is that they have to balance public opinion currents. And this is not understood by the government of Sri Lanka, because the government of Sri Lanka seems to have forgotten, if it ever knew, what a truly robust civil society driven competitive democracy really is and how it functions.
But Doctor, the role of these countries are to be, I hear, taken up at the tribunal itself. Is there any confirmation on that?
It seems very likely to me, because there has been a creeping story about support given by Britain. Documents have come out going, in fact, back to 1971 and the insurrection of 71 and Britain's role. So questions have been raised in Parliament about cooperation between the British state, British companies sanctioned by the state, and Sri Lanka at different points of time. These are all efforts to pressurize the government of Britain. There was a meeting a few days ago where the Tamil lobbies, including an articulate spokeswoman, Jan Jananayagan, met the shadow foreign secretary of the Labour Party and urged him to urge the government of Britain not to wait till March 2014 to call for an international inquiry. I mean, they are so impatient, they don't even want to wait the 80 days between now and March. So there are efforts to pressurize the governments of Britain, United States and India to keep on target against Sri Lanka. And the efforts come from global civil society, which is influenced by lobbies paid by or from within the Tamil diaspora. And these in turn influence opposition members of parliament in the EU countries and also in the United States, and they target the governments and make sure that the governments will take a tough line on Sri Lanka in 80 days in Geneva in March 2014.
Well, Doctor, thank you very much for joining us, talking about the importance of foreign policy. It really is one of the main ingredients in having good relationships with other countries. You've proven that in today's discussion. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us on Vantage Point. And to everyone at home, thank you as well for watching us. We'll see you again in another 2 weeks. But make sure, if you have failed to catch it on TV, you can obviously go on to our website. That's www.newsfirst.lk, where we will have the video of this Vantage Point episode and various other episodes of Vantage Points that have been aired earlier on. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care and good night.